If she doesn't learn a skill, she will live on the streets. And there is no place for her to go, no government assistance. There is no hope for even marrying. There's a desperate cry in India, and there's a reason for the desperation. Let's look at the next one. That may not seem like much to you, but cows reign in India. As a matter of fact, they have the right-of-way on every road, highway. You have to get around them. They do not get around you. They rule. And they rule because of a very special thought that, again, is not in my Western way of thinking. Hinduism, with its 330 million gods, believes in reincarnation. And this could be Uncle Harry. Now, you and I think, how in the world could you ever believe that? But from a child on, there's this different view about how humans and animals and even trees and rocks and all of nature work together. Now, you and I, because we have had a Judeo-Christian background, we would believe that mankind, women, men, boys, and girls, are created in the image of God to have dominion over the earth, to make the earth and all of the animals a blessing. Not them. Everybody's equal. As a matter of fact, rats eat more rice than the people, while the people go hungry. Why? Because the elephant god, have you ever seen that picture, a Hindu god that has an elephant trunk coming out? That god has the rats as their chariot, as the chariot for the god. And so they would honor a rat on equal basis with a human, even though disease and death is all around them. You see, there's a reason for the desperation, but there's a result of the desperation. This is an orphanage, and Sean first showed us this. This orphanage has 1,000 kids in it. 1,000 kids. Every one of these kids would be on the street if Bishop Jacob hadn't found a way to bring them in. This is the largest of the orphanages that we visited. Notice how they all have good clothes. They all are healthy. It'd be impossible for them to have this kind of life out in the streets. I want to tell you about one little boy that we don't even have a picture of, but his name is Roger. Roger would be in this mix somewhere. He's about this high and he's 7 years old. He's short for his age because even when he was a little boy living on the street with his 2 siblings, he was malnutrition and had a belly out like you'd see only in Africa. And he was stunted in his growth. He had a name that was dedicated to a Hindu god. And his own dad, because he couldn't support him, took him to the market and tried to sell him for $10. No one bought him. Because he was small and diseased, nobody wanted him. His dad couldn't support him, mother dead, and here he is on a slave market in the culture. But somehow, by God's grace, Bishop Jacob found him, and he came into the orphanage. They renamed him Roger, because Roger means king. This guy is going to be strong. We got on our knees and we hugged him. He didn't even know what a fatherly touch would be like. He stood like a stiff boy with his arms down as I put my arms around him and pulled him into myself. As I spoke words of tenderness and prayed, holding his head, praying for blessing, he didn't even know how to respond. But because of this orphanage, he's got hope. It is one day I hope to take a team back to India and we will serve in this orphanage just as Sean and a team from CHS did, and there's much that we can do. But that's only one result of desperation. Look at another one. Now these ladies are covered up. It's customary in India for ladies to cover their heads, but they cover their faces when they're in deep shame. Why are they ashamed? Well, because they've been rejected and downcast. They've been rejected by their own society, covered in shame. And here's the reason. Disfigurement. This lady has leprosy. The whole country of India would say there's no leper problem. And yet millions of people live in leper colonies. We got to visit this leper colony and begin to look into these disfigured faces. And one of the highlights of the trip, when Aaron asked me after just about 4 or 5 days, we'd already been there, and he says, what was the highlight for you? I said, touching lepers. Might remember in Luke 17 where Jesus was on his way to Jerusalem and he was along the border of Samaria and Galilee and he was going into a village and hadn't made it into the village, and 10 men who had leprosy, it says very clearly, they stood at a distance and they called out in a loud voice, Jesus, Master, have pity on us. You can see why. See, this man doesn't have any fingers. You always eat rice in all of your meals in India with your right hand. And this guy, if you can just imagine trying to eat rice with your palm, he's palming it into his mouth. He reminded me of the people that in the biblical times no one would touch, and yet Jesus called Aaron and me to actually touch them. Look at this lady. She has no toes, or at least they're mangled and falling off. And the sore on the bottom of her foot is very typical of lepers. You see, leprosy is something that could be cured and prevented. Leprosy, as I found out from a nurse who was there from Finland, said that leprosy is caused because of people living in squalor. They're living in filth. And because they constantly live in filth, their immune system is shot and they cannot counteract the virus that is called leprosy. And this leprosy makes its way out in an oozing sore on the bottom of the foot. And yet, they have medical teams. Look at this doctor who dedicates his time to go to the leper colonies and to bring antibiotics and to help them wash out those sores on the bottom of their feet. One of the highlights for me, before we go to that, was Aaron and I going and touching the lepers, praying for them, and giving them a bag of rice in the name of Jesus. Well, then we went to the convention. Aaron, how many people were here? Tell just what we think.
So they have registration for the first day, and there was about 8,000 people who registered. But then after registration is done, people just keep on coming in, and that's really when they start coming in. And so they believe it's about 12,000 people that were there.
Yeah, and after I'd preached to this group, what do I have to say to them? The guy turned to me and he says, have you ever preached to 12,000 people at one time? I said, no, never. They walk, like Aaron said before, about 70 miles, and they sit on the floor. And they sit in this position for hours, all day and night, soaking in any blessing that God would bring. Now, you can imagine feeding these people on an open fire. Here's one guy with a pot of rice, and they feed 12,000 people. It was just an amazing, amazing journey. And then on top of that, there were marriages. Now I want you to look at the happy couples. All marriages in India are arranged. They probably never met but one time before they got married. And so they're kind of somber. Marriage is a great contractual thing, but you don't marry the one you love. You love the one you're married to. There is almost no divorce rate in India. Almost none. We had the opportunity to come up and pray over these and dedicate them to the Lord. Here is a woman praying. She probably walked many times and crying out to Jesus. And one of the key highlights of the convention was communion. A pastor, a bishop, will go out through the 12,000 people. He'll place a hand on their head, praying a prayer blessing, and pour the juice into the mouth to try to keep from the spreading of disease with anyone touching the cup with their lips. The praise was energetic because the people have been liberated from great darkness. worshiping demons to worshiping the living God. At the end of all of this was a graduation. And Aaron was the speaker. Actually, he was one of many. But Aaron, tell him briefly what you had to say to the graduates, because you've never spoken at a commencement, right? Tell us, O commencement speaker.
So God gave me the verse for the graduates. It was Matthew 5:11 and 12 that says, "Blessed are you when men insult you, persecute you, and say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, for great is your reward in heaven." And so I was just sharing with them about how they will be persecuted and that they might even need to give their lives for Christ. But I was praying that the rewards that it talks about in Revelations in the first few chapters when there were the letters to the 7 churches, it says at the end of each one, to those who overcome, they will receive a certain reward. And so just praying those over the people.
Aaron spoke with such grace as he faced these graduates and did a wonderful job, my friend. Well, the next slide shows him also in style. And then as we move on, Bishop Jacob would close the graduation and the convention with a prayer of God's blessing. An amazing, amazing journey. Next one, please. Each of the graduates, if they were men, received bicycles so they can drive into and pedal into the villages. These are all graduates willing to give their lives. When we looked at this crowd, Aaron turned to me and said, you know, some of these won't be alive this time next year. But they take the bikes and they go into the villages, all armed with a Bible and a bike. Let's go to the next one. The women get sewing machines. This is fairly new. Only happened in about the last year or so, and the Bible college has been going for a few years. They have sewing machines because women need skills if they're going to go into the culture. And as they take the skill of tailoring into the culture, they're not only able to make a living, but as people come, they share the gospel. Notice they're holding their Bibles up high. Let's go to the next one. So here is a man prepared for the mission field. And you need to know from Living Hope, we supplied 26 of the 48 bikes needed. Let's go. That one, we supplied 26 of the sewing machines needed for the women who are graduated. So we have supplied more than half of all that was there. Next one. When we went to orphanages, they always danced for us. You know, in Hindu culture, you dance to gods that are dark. And when they come out of that, even the culture of children raised, they dance to the Lord. I'd love for them to come just as the group came last week and shake us up a bit. Let's dance to the Lord, as they did. The orphans were awesome. Whether in the village or city, they prayed and sought God and even prayed for us. We went to an elderly village, and these elderly people just came around Aaron like bees to honey. You know, skin color really doesn't matter. He's my boy. And, you know, for them to come and touch people or have people touch them was quite an amazing, amazing thing.